In this video, we're going to continue working with our base materials. You can see in my previewer right here and in my context-sensitive 3D menu that I have filled up this model with a bunch of different materials and assigned them their color IDs and tweaked their basic colors and dynamasks. I showed us all how to do this in the last video, so nothing new there. But there are still quite a few areas on here that I need to go in and add some more detail to make the model that much better and just the overall finish it. And the first thing we're going to show us is how we can add an already existing material. So you just create a material from scratch and how we can apply it to our color ID material. So typically we would hold down C and Shift and select a color island. This time, we're going to create the material and then assign it to a material ID. So let's look and see how we can do that. So let's go ahead and add, and depending on where your cursor is where the group is going to be made. But at this point, it doesn't matter too much. So we're going to add a new smart material, and and I want to give this kind of like a bronze or copper feel, some nice warm bronze. And we're going to go to Create. And that's going to turn the whole model from the layer down that it's over. Layer order matters here. So every detail below this bronze material right here gets added to the entire mesh because we haven't given it a dynamask yet. All right. But with just having our material selected, if we go into 3D, hold down the C button, and no shift, but just C and left click the color ID group. Then we can see that its dynamask gets updated, and this group only shows the paneled areas on the wings. And we can apply that bronze material straight to our ship. Nice. Next, we're going to see how we can create overlay layers on our materials and tweak them using custom dynamask that we create for it. So one thing we'll notice about my ship is that it's pretty uniform in terms of its main color, this bluish white color. Let's add a little bit of visual variety here by creating an overlay layer on top of it, as if the sun had bleached the top of the ship, like it was flying through space. So we're going to select our base metal group, and I'm going to click into it, and we have these layers inside of my material group right here. What we're going to do is we're going to create an overlay layer and edit its dynamask. So to create a new layer and one that's instantly an overlay, I'm going to hold down Control and click Clean Layer. So Control and click that, and it'll instantly make it a color overlay. All right, and then I want to select the color that I'm going to overlay, like the bleached burnout color that we want to add to the ship. So maybe more of a washed out, brighter white. And we're going to click OK. And you'll notice that it instantly kind of brightens up my whole ship. That's because we haven't edited our dynamask yet. So let's click our mask icon. We don't need to paint anything yet. We're just going to apply a preset dynamask. And this can be used to add more sand in the cracks, scratches on the corners, a lot of preset dynamask here. But I'm looking for, I think there's one specifically for sun bleach, like right there, sun bleach. And what this does is it'll look at the model itself, and it'll try to bleach out the topmost parts of the model, and maybe leave the bottom done. Let's see. Let's invert this mask. What that looks like. There we go. That's what we wanted to see. That wouldn't have made much sense for the bottom part of the plane to be completely white. Remember, when we're in this masking mode, black means no detail, white means all the detail. So if we're trying to get more of a sun bleached look, let's put it on the top. And we'll notice that some of my masks are reading the seams here. So we might have to go in and edit this mask a little bit later. I can show us how to do that. But let's just focus on getting it on there. So I invert the mask, and I'm going to tweak some of these settings here. I'm going to turn down the ambient occlusion. And I think it's just a little too much white everywhere. Let's tone down the texture. Object space direction. Yeah, there we go. So really just trying to add color variation to the ship. And we can always adjust the opacity later. Let's increase that contrast to make this detail. No, I want it to be more splotchy, less defined. So actually I'm going to lower this contrast by quite a lot. The tightness, let's see how the tightness affects it. Kind of makes things a little bit wider. Again, I want it to be more of a subtle effect on the paint. All right, so that white color that we used to see, now we're going to apply this Dynamask by accepting mask, and we should see less of the white color everywhere. And now we get a little bit more visual variety on the plane. And I'm even going to tweak this opacity down just a little bit more. I don't want it to be too in your face, but at the same time, you know, none of that detail, all of the detail somewhere in the 70s. There we go. So that's how we can add overlay layers and use our dynamasking system to kind of give it some visual variety. Now the shape's just that much closer to completion. I'm going to keep working with this plane here, and I'm going to now do some hand painting on it to, give us some maybe deeper blues, maybe paint in some of the detail in these crevices here, using some hand-painted methods. One thing I want to be clear of is that the overlay color right here we want on the very top because it's bleached our cavity dirt, our fine rust, and our scuffs. In fact, let's call this sun bleach. But if I'm going in and painting on top of the paint, I'm probably going to want to paint right on top of the paint layer so all the scuffs, rust, and cavity dirt still take effect where they do. So I'm going to make sure I select my paint layer first, and then we're going to select add color paint layer with my paintbrush. That's going to initialize 3Do's painting tools, and what we're going to do now is go over all the settings to start painting inside of 3Do right here. All right, the first thing we're going to do is select our brush. So I'm going to click on the little circle right here, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make our custom brush. So we're going to go to in our brush tip shape, there's all these tabs here, and we have a bunch of different presets. So if I'm trying to paint something that's a little bit more natural, I'm going to create something with a little bit of noise in it. Pick something with some noise. And then we can always see the effect of our brush right down here in this black area. And this is our brush size. It'll affect how big we paint on the model. And our spacing is, how often it makes a mark as we drag a brush stroke. Shape dynamics can dramatically change the shape of your brush stroke. So we can make it, the size jitter especially, will create a lot more visual variety as we paint. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create something that's got, just some nice variety in it. All right. And now that I got my brush, I'm going to click on the pop down arrow. And now you see I have the little brush icon, the alpha there. You can see a little paint splotch there. Next, we're going to adjust my opacity. And I'm not going to paint above 40% here. Next, I'm going to choose my color. So I'm going to go in and grab uh, a darker blue, just a little bit darker. We'll click OK. And now we're able to go in and we're able to start painting. So I can add some color down here where the seams are. And, deep in here, let's add a lot of color because this is probably not touched much. And feel free to switch between the eraser and the brush constantly, just so you can go in and keep massaging areas. And let's look how our opacity works. So I go all the way up. You can see that I get a stronger brush. And let's take our opacity out and kind of go in there and make it a little bit more irregular. So we can start adding some pretty cool grungy detail and paint effects by hand. And now you can see where the two models meet now. I can start adding detail that maybe the curvature maps based on the normal maps might have missed. And that's a pretty, and look how much more that ties it in together. Now it doesn't look like it's so much like floating geometry anymore, but maybe fused together. Just because we're given a little extra attention. And that's something you can't get out of just applying your base materials and calling it done. So I'm going to keep going in and just drawing out some detail. And, when we do a grunge layer up here in a second, I'll come back in and add that for us. But I kind of consider this layer like maybe some grunge or some fresher paint, old paint, something that's not as washed out and bleached. And that really helps getting back up in there. In fact, if that's where exhaust and fumes come, you can always go in there and add a totally tubular grunge yourself. Okay, so let's connect the grunge there. And we're just bringing together the model that much better. You don't want it to be too regular. So hand painting stuff is just so valuable when it comes to texturing things. There's so many things that that automation just can't account for. Come in here and paint a little bit of discoloration right there. There we go. And by the same token, I can also paint some highlights in. Let me delete some of that out. Oh, I want to make sure I get some. I'll start off thick right here, then dial it back. Let me adjust my light. Control and Shift to pull the light underneath. And let's just go in and Control and Shift to get the light back up. Nice. All right, so I'm going to change my paint color now and go really bright. Maybe shift it warmer a little bit. And I'm going to go on edges with my paintbrush. I'm going to adjust the size real quick. And we'll just paint some highlights across the seams. There was a seam right there, and then right here, right on the front there, I want to turn my opacity down a little bit. It's getting a little too crunchy. And notice how you can paint on areas that aren't part of the Dynamask. If you hold down the M key, you can see everywhere you've painted just by isolating the color. So the M key is Very important. You can also just select separate masks, gloss, normal, albedo. So we're painting in albedo now, so we'll leave it there. If you want to delete everything you've done, you can hit clear. And unfortunately, there's no Control Z. So make sure that when you do that, you really mean to. So I want to kind of come in and repaint some of these details back. I thought I was being a little too chunky the first time around. Just adding too much. I'm trying to be subtle here. I'm going to go back and change it to PBR shading so I can see my detail a little bit. All right. So that's how we can go in and paint some hand-painted detail and really coax and massage this texture to come around. Whenever you get done with your painting, I went back and redid my paint job a little bit, made it a little bit more subtle. Whenever you get done with your painting, you need to toggle paint mode off so these colors can get baked into your maps. So we'll just click the paintbrush, and you can see now I have a paint layer, and we'll call this highlights. All right, so we added a lot of interesting color variation and consideration for how our ship was built. Why don't we see now how we can hand edit our Dynamask now that we know how to paint inside of 3Do. Really easy tools to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and fix out these really sooty corners on my main paint layer. That's a lot of cavity, right? That's a lot of dirt right there. So I'm going to toggle off the mask to find which one's the culprit. And it's this cavity dirt right here. All right, so we're going to go in and click on the 3Do or the Dynamask icon right here. This time, though, instead of clicking no, we're going to go to yes in our quick editing, so we can actually paint our alpha mask, our black and white grayscale mask, to determine why this thing is just so muddy. So if we press M, we can toggle in and out of mask, or you can select it by hand up here. At M, we'll toggle mask on and off. So let's leave our mask on. And what we need to do is we need to soften up this really bright stuff here while still maintaining its randomness. All right, so I'm going to go in and select my paintbrush, and I'm going to select a brush now. Let's get a brush shape going, and we'll just pick something with some noise. We'll pick its size, and we'll decrease the spacing. Let's bring in some shape dynamics and increase the size jitter so we can get some more randomness whenever we paint our masks. So there is it's a little bit different in our toolbar here. We still have an opacity slider, but now instead of a color wheel, we can only choose black to white. And what we want to do is we want to go in and lessen this mask, because you can see the mask corresponds to how dirty our ship is right here. And we also have some pretty apparent seams going on right here. Right? Why would we want to go through all the trouble of creating nice textures and then just let the seams get exposed while we're using procedural texture generation? It just doesn't make sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix those seams and tone down this dirt. All right, so I'm going to pick a somewhat high opacity with a black paint, and I'm going to come in and just hand paint a lot of this stuff out. Press M to go back and forth. In fact, you can paint in this mode if you want. And of course, if I bring back the white slider, I can go back in and paint some of this detail. And what's beautiful in this mode is, since I'm not painting color, it only affects our islands. All right? I shouldn't have done that, because there is no undo button. Oh, that made it worse. So let me go in and scrub this detail out. Set down the opacity and kind of go in and get that. So I'm just going to really tone down the opacity now so I can work with my brush a little bit easier. See how I'm able just to keep making strokes, and gradually I can tame that dirt. Same thing here. And our albedo mask is actually showing what our mask is doing. Next, I'm going to go to white, high opacity, smaller brush size. So let's go to brush tip shape. In fact, that's too cumbersome. The bracket keys next to your P key on your keyboard, those brackets will adjust the size of your brush. All right, so that's a little too much there. So let me go in and kill that with some black. Let's just go in and go down the seam and kill most of this detail out. Now, the seam may show up in other maps as well, so be careful and do your due diligence and check for obvious seams going around your texture map. Sometimes this procedural generation isn't as 100% as we would like it to be. I missed the crevice there. Let me get it dirty again. So you really want crevices to be kind of dirty. So we can come in and dirty up that normal crevice that we have there. Yeah. So now that seam isn't as noticeable with the dirt going right down it. And we've cleaned off. Let me go in and keep stroking. Sometimes I like painting from a distance so I can kind of get a feel for how it looks. Let my opacity and get rid of most of that dirt there. Kind of looked weird. All right, great. So that's how you can go in and hand paint your Dynamasks. And don't forget to accept mask when you're done. And let's see, does fine rust create that seam there? Not so much. Hell, let's go into, let's see what the mask mode in our paint layer looks like. Maybe we can paint out that seam there. I'm just trying things at this point. No, I think it's a grime issue. So you'll have to go in and investigate and see what parts. Is it the scruffs? I'm just going to turn everything off until I find the culprit. The edge just might kind of be there in the model as well. So I'm just going to bring everything back. I think that's about as close as we can get to that seam. But then again, if you'll notice the resolution of the model, this asset was never meant to be seen this close up because that resolution is starting to fall apart that close. But if we back it up, then texture seams and alias detail doesn't become so much of an issue. I mean, look at the inside of our ship up close. That's like Nintendo 64 graphics. But from far away, not too bad. So we wanted to go in and change our grime option, though, because it was a little too obvious along that seam. So go in and fix your seams as much as you can. And then remember in your paint mode, go in and paint in detail along intersecting floating geometry. And next, I'm going to show us how we can add grunge detail using single surface scans. So this is just going to be one detail where we can go in and just paint in some noisy, grunge, dirty stuff to show the wear and tear of something, but in the exact positions that we want it to be in. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the top layer of our material group here, and we're going to we're going to add a new material to this. And this is important. We're not just adding a regular layer, because if we add a material, we can get to these masking patterns down here. And if you look, we see we have a grunge. So it's going to give us this random pattern all over the areas that we paint in with our Dynamask. So let's just select one of the grunges, and we'll hit create. And as you can see, we got grunge everywhere on our ship now. Let's change its color before we go in and edit its Dynamask. So I'm going to kind of give it a nice bright brown. And now we're going to go in and edit its Dynamask. Yes, we will paint this time. And we're going to do a combination of using a preset mask. What I'm going to do first is invert this mask so I don't see it anywhere. And then, well, actually, you know what? I'm going to keep it off because we're going to use one of these. Where's cavity? You can type in cavity. So if you know you like certain ones, cavity soot. So it's going to look for all the deep cavities, the recessed areas on the ship, and just add it to those. If we pull up M, we can see it's got a nice start for us. Again, that cavity map is still selecting the corner of the ship pretty bad. So let's go in and paint that detail out. Yeah, again, I'm going to create a new brush. It's really easy to do this stuff. So you just click the shape and maybe increase the spacing, turn on shape dynamics, turn up size jitter, and now we have a pretty random brush. I'm going to increase my size of my tool brush right here. We're just going to paint. Actually, I'm going to shorten the spacing of this. It was getting harder to fill in that space. There we go. All right. And I'm going to go in and lower my opacity and brush size, and just go in and coax this away. You may have to just hand paint out some areas on your cavity maps that just get blown out, like you saw there. Not the best thing. We want it to be subtle, but yet still have a presence. So you can see, I want to keep that dirt on the areas where this panel meets down there. So I can do that. You can see I have a little bit of dirt there, but the mask is way too strong. Pressing M, you can see that the cavity map just had a field day there. But we're going to add it in, and let's just keep adjusting some things like so. All right, so we keep pressing M. You can see that we got some dirt there. And now, while we're in Dynamask mode, we can actually turn the brush white and add in some grunge or rust or whatever you want to call that anywhere we want to. It's all about the black or white. Black takes it away. So that's kind of like an eraser, and white is a brush, and in between it's kind of like an opacity setting almost. I like going black and white and then setting my opacity separate. So there we go. So now if I'm adding dirt in, I might want to go to my brush and increase my line spacing so it's a little bit more random. So this is the effect I get now. So that's one single stroke. You can see it added a lot of variation as I was painting. Alright, let's increase my opacity. I'll go up there. I want to come in and paint some nice dirt in there and then take it away a little bit with less opacity. And I'm going to go in and paint dirt at the corners or where my mesh intersects, kind of like we were doing before, but this time we're being a little bit more exact about it. We're just adding another layer of color information. And remember, black takes away. White giveth. So we'll just go in and that brush with the jitter and the spacing really does help in situations like just adding some randomness to our color. And we're basically just exposing the color underneath when we mask and demask stuff. So I'll just do a long line where this connects. And then come in with my black, lower my opacity, and kind of just kiss it as I go down. Just kiss, 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 kiss. And now we have a nice, dirty texture on the way down. Let's do somewhat of the same thing here, where our floating geometry is really connecting. And then kiss it off. So it's a dance between just adding it and taking away, maybe adding some more and taking it away, until you massage it into the shape that you want. If we look at our mask now, that's where we're getting this dark grunge. A little much there. Let me just go in and kiss some of this away. All right. So that's how we can add grunge layers using Dynamask to reveal where to expose the grunge and where to mask it away. And to finish it out, let's accept our mask. There we go. Now our base color of our ship's looking pretty good. And you would want to give this kind of treatment to most every material I have on there, but I'm just spending a lot of time on the base one because it takes up 90% of the ship. So I'm making sure that it looks good. It's got a lot of color variation on it, and the textures make sense for what's going on with the ship. The last thing I'm going to show in this video is how we can create a material group without it being assigned a color ID. So, for instance, with these missiles, I forgot to make a color ID group from like the top of it to the whole base of it. I kind of want to have the tip of the missile a different color, but my color ID map doesn't allow for it. So let's go in and see how we can change this. I want just the tips of my missiles to be red. So we're going to go in and check that now. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to my missile group. I believe is that red? Yep, it's this one right here. Good thing I named it, right? Because we're having to go back and revisit these texture groups. Let's go into it and let's change it from that red I was really digging at first. And let's go in and let's give it more of a gunmetalish blue. See what that looks like. A little bit darker. There we go. You can see I have a nice material group for the missile jets or whatever pulses them. Let me re-zoom out. There we go. But now I want to turn the tip of my missile red. But this Dynamask or this material is just covering all of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go hop out, and above my missile, I'm going to make sure I'm selected there, because remember, our order matters. If this detail was below my missile blue that I just made, it wouldn't show up. So by making sure that this new smart material I'm adding is above the missile, it'll make sure that it gets drawn on. And we're just going to go with another painted metal. Let's get that eroded painted metal going on. That looks pretty good. All right. You'll notice, though, that it applies this eroded metal all over my ship. Not the best look, right? So what we got to do is we got to isolate just this red to the tips of my missiles. And by now, we should kind of know how to work with our masking systems and painting on here. So you'll see the problem. Our Dynamask is completely white, meaning it's being applied to everything on our model. So what we're going to do is we're going to edit our Dynamask now. And keep in mind, we're not in the individual layers of the new group we made. We're at the very root layer. You can see that, missile engine vents. There's my base metal we were just working on. So what we want to do is we want to edit the Dynamask of the actual material group. So yeah, you can do that. So we'll click yes, and yes, we want to paint it. And basically, this mask is going to be what our new red material is applied to. All right. So if we change our viewer to mask, holy goodness, we have this black applied, or this red applied to everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to just draw in our mask. So we're going to invert it, first of all, so that nothing is on the mask. And then we're going to select a completely opaque 100% opacity brush, 100% white, and we're just going to paint in that material right on the tips of our missiles. Remember, lighting is your friend, so be sure to shift the light. And we're a little lucky because we have this little crevice to kind of mask where we're painting, and just resetting your camera or moving it around constantly is really good here. And of course, this only really works if you can get to the model to paint it. And since my missile is mirrored like 6 times, I can go in and just paint everything. You'll notice I've got some seams here, like I can't quite fill in those seams. So let's click on Fix Seams, and you'll see that it kind of overpainted where I was painting a little bit, and it fixed those seams for me. So now my mask is just perfect. Great. All right. So after we see our handiwork there with our mask, again, I wouldn't just paint this in Dynamask mode. I'd make sure you were painting it in your PBR shading, so you can see the normal detail that we're trying to isolate there. And of course, if you get a little paranoid and you need to reverse it, you can just click black, and it'll paint in black on that mask, like so. And you can get it the way you want it. So basically, the lesson is, I'm going to accept this mask. The lesson is that whenever you create a brand new smart material, all that matters is what the materials group Dynamask looks like. That's what it gets applied to. You can see all the thumbnails. See, there's my base metal for my plane. Look how much of the model it takes up. So you just need to go in and edit your masks for your materials, and you can isolate where you want them applied to. And now I have some pretty dope missiles with red tips, because we all know the best missiles have red blow-up B points. I think that's the technical term. All right, so we covered a lot of techniques to get in there and start hand painting on our model, and massaging our materials, and hopefully you take these lessons and apply them to your own models. Again, really, it's just about knowing how to edit Dynamask and knowing how to create new layers. Which one of these layers is the correct one to use at which time? You know, do you want to add a new smart material, or do you want to add, if you're making grunge or some other noisy thing, do you want to add just a single material with a pattern on it? You just want to add a clean layer so you can do an overlay, and then edit the Dynamask later, or do you want to hand paint a layer? From there, it's just picking our colors and basically editing our Dynamasks. And that's all dDo is. And notice what we get whenever we're finished. All of our maps are here and they're updated with exactly what we need to export with Unity, which I'll show us in the next video.